Shut up! You're killing me, Smallz.
Oh, there it is. It is time. It is time to do a Sixers podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Killin Smallz podcast. I am your host, Mike Small. Today's podcast will be a phenomenal dissection of the most confounding team in basketball. That's right, your Philadelphia 76ers. My guest today is Keith Pompey from the Philadelphia Inquirer, who I think is the best beat reporter in the city, and he does a great job with the Sixers. We really dug into this team. We looked at the hype preseason versus the reality of what they are now. How much of this is Brett Brown's fault? And what could be done to make this team live up to expectations? Keith, as always, was candid, interesting, and well-informed. I think you'll enjoy this a lot. But before we start, I invite you to give us a follow on Twitter, which is Mike Small, that's me. And the Twitter handle is Killin, Killin, me, Smallz, Smallz, with the number 2 after that. And I'll follow you right back. And leave us a rating and review on this podcast, which, again, you can get on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Sit back, enjoy it, and let us know what you think. All right, let's bring in the guy that I think is the best beat reporter in the city of Philadelphia. He is the Sixers beat reporter for how many years, Keith?
This is my 7th year.
7th year. Yeah. Keith Pompey. Keith, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm honored, man. This is a pretty good podcast. I shouldn't say that, but it is.
Well, I am happy to be a contributor to your podcast, the Locked On Sixers, and I consider you friend of the pod for the Killin Smallz podcast. All right, so Keith, let's get right into this team. They are not playing as well as everybody thought. Everybody's all the pundits had the Sixers as coming out of the East, fighting with Milwaukee for the best team in the East. Definitely one of the top 4 elite teams in the league. As we do this podcast, they're in 6th place. They have a god-awful road record. And they look like they've been put together, on paper at the beginning of the season. You see max contracts, you see all-stars, you see 5 spots filled up with guys that all 5 could be all-stars any year, but it's not fitting right now. One thing that I want to kick this off with is I did a little research, and thanks to a couple of folks on Twitter for confirming with me. The Sixers are 20-4 this year when they shoot above 35% from three-point range. Is it as simple as the Sixers just need to shoot better?
Nah. I would like to know how many of those games were at home too, like of that, You
did a great article the other day. I'll give you a shout out comparing the Sixers shooting woes at home versus the road, and it is kind of staggering.
Yeah, it's like 20%.
Yeah, it's dramatic.
It is. It's like a 20% difference. With the Sixers, like they shoot 20% higher at home on threes than they do on the road in the last couple games. So it's kind of staggering.
So the Sixers have played, according to Basketball Reference, the 10th toughest schedule in the league, and they've got one of the easiest for the rest of the year. Now, what I would wonder is, you figure they're going to get, even with Embiid out for a while, you figure they're going to run off a bunch of wins. They're playing the Knicks, they're playing the Nets, who are actually pretty good, but they're going to play them on the road. They've got some really soft teams coming up. Do you think there's a chance that there would be some false hope going into this, because this team needs something?
Yeah, the team really does need something. I know, the stat that they're 20-4 when they shoot 35% or higher from 3. But to me, you have a lot of guys who can make 3-point shots, but they're not exactly 3-point shooters.
Right.
The best one on the team is Furkan Korkmaz, and he's great at home, but he struggles on the road, as most young reserves do, young players. So the Sixers, they have to go out there and get like a veteran who can shoot. The problem is they just don't have the money to get the type of guy that they really need. But, the thing about the Sixers, they got in this situation with a lot of hype before. They had these expectations that, they were going to go to the championship, even though this team is different, even though, as you alluded to earlier, the pieces just don't fit. So now people are going to say, hey, just because we have an easy schedule, we're going to win. Well, you would assume that the Sixers wouldn't lose to the Orlando Magic twice on the road. You would assume that the Sixers would have held on to beat the Dallas Mavericks on the road. So it's one of those things where don't get the false hope. You just have to make sure Embiid comes back healthy. That's one, and you have to also hope that the Sixers go out there and get a piece that you can build with.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit later because you had an article the other day saying that they're looking at Langston Galloway and Luke Kennard. And I think actually Kennard, even though I'm partial to not having Dookies on the team, I do think Kennard would be a pretty good fit. But I want to get back to that. And I'm going to ask you the big question right now. And this is the one I got most on Twitter. How much of what's gone on this year do you think is Brett Brown's fault? Now, if we go back to the offseason, Brett Brown was part of the collaborative team that decided that Elton Brand would be the general manager. And everybody loved what Elton did on paper. They lost Jimmy Butler, and whatever the reason was, whether it was his choice, the Sixers' choice, or both, they made the decision to bring in Al Horford, which weakened the Celtics and theoretically was going to give them the backup help for Joel Embiid that they were searching for. He has not fit at all in the power forward role, and he hasn't even played great when Embiid's out. He thinks he's James Harden all of a sudden doing step back threes, but they're not going in. And he just looks very, very uncomfortable. I have a hard time thinking he's washed. I just think it's fit. There's a lot of other fit issues going on. Ben Simmons has been, let's look at the last 3 games. He's been all worldly over the last 3 games in the first half and completely disappeared in the second half. How much of this do you pin on the coach?
You have to pin a lot of it on the coach. I get that their pieces don't fit, but it comes a point in time when you got to try to make them fit. You do. Even if you have to do like, hey, Al, we love you. You're great. You're this and that. But we're going to need you to come off the bench a little bit. And if you notice, the one thing about Ben Simmons looking all worldly in the first half and then struggling in second, well, what teams do is they're making adjustments. And so a lot of times, though, the Sixers are slowing the ball up. They take the ball out of Ben's hands in the second half, and Josh Richardson is running it, where you have Ben in the high post. Now, we all know that Ben is not a shooter. So when you have Ben without the ball, you're basically playing 4-on-5.
Right.
And so Ben disappears. In regards to Al Horford, yesterday Al Horford shot 9 threes. 9 threes. And when you look at record, like you said, it's hard to believe that he's washed. When you look at tapes of when he played for Boston, a lot of stuff ran through him. Like he was on the post, he would get the ball. He didn't always score a lot, but what he would do is he would set up teammates. That's Al Horford's game.
Which is what Ben Simmons is doing now.
Exactly.
And then the lane is clogged up.
But whenever you see Al Horford shoot the threes and it's off balance when it goes, you're like cringing like, oh my gosh, don't do that. Because that's not Al. But that's the coach telling him to keep shooting because he thinks that's a way to space the floor. Because what it is, that's the way to space the floor. Now, again, Brett Brown is going to get blamed for this because he is the coach, and you have to, you have to switch it up. Al Horford looks like Dario Saric when he was here. And he looks like whoever else played football, not named Ersan Ilyasova, because that was a good role for him.
Yeah.
But the problem is like, and it's not just Brett Brown. You have to blame the front office too, because you got these pieces in the fit. The thing that they should have done, I love Josh Richardson. I think he's a good addition. I think he has a lot of heart. But what they should have looked at for is also going out and getting a backup point guard, a guy who can run the show when you have Ben Simmons in there, because Ben is not going to shoot. They didn't do that. You also need a shooter. Now, again, like I said, I'm not saying that Josh Richardson, that's all they could get. That's the best thing they could get for Jimmy Butler. But what I'm saying is, in free agency, you had to get a shooter because you lost J.J. Redick, and you had to get a backup point guard. You lost T.J. McConnell. They got Neto. Whenever he makes a mistake, he's out the game. Trey Burke, whenever he makes a mistake, he's out of the game. You need a solid point guard who can play alongside Ben Simmons.
Chris Paul.
Yeah, but
that'd be hard to get.
Yeah, hard to get with that money right about
So
now.
one of the questions that I did get on Twitter is if you look at the numbers when Ben Simmons is playing with Trey Burke, they're pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you think they went away from that? And why does Trey Burke continue to end up in the doghouse? Because I'll be honest, I don't think his defense has been all that bad.
Nah, it's not. But see, the thing is, if you ever notice, and maybe I need to go back and check it out, so I'm not giving misinformation, but it appears to me that Trey Burke will have a solid game, or he'll have a string of solid games. And then once he messes up, that's it. Like, you know,
he missed a couple of shots against Indiana and didn't play in the second half.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the same thing with Neto. Like, you know, Neto comes in, he gives energy, and then it's kind of like, you know, I guess the more you play them, they get a little overexposed in the coach's eyes, and they make mistakes, and then I gotta go to the other one. So that's the inconsistency there. But yeah, you're right, because you know, as long as when you play with Ben Simmons, you have to have a shooter on the floor. You just have to. And Trey can make it work because, you know, he's not a conventional point guard. You know, he can hit shots. You know, he can, you know, he's better in passing than what people think, but he's not like a TJ McConnell type. You know what I mean? He's not.
But he's the only guy on the team that could get his own shot off the dribble. Exactly. Maybe Josh, but
yeah.
But he's probably the best at it.
He is, and that's the mind-boggling thing, you know. And here's another thing: like if you look at it, you know, Brett Brown only wants to play X amount of guys, and then there was a point at one time, and I hope I'm not doing a question that you're about to ask, but there was a point where he wanted to get Trey Burke on the floor, so he had to sit Matisse because he didn't want James Ennis not to play, and then they go to Indiana. And he wants Matisse to get extended minutes, but he wants these other two guys to play, talking about Trey, and he wanted Neto just in case he needed him. So James Ennis doesn't play, you know, so it's, you know, their rotations are a little inconsistent.
You know, I think about baseball, and when you look at a really good baseball team, everyone in the bullpen knows their role. You've got the 8th inning, you've got the 7th inning, you're going to get lefties out. Do you think the Sixers bench understands their role as much as Brett keeps switching it around?
How can they? No, they don't.
Do you think he talks to him? Do you think he sits? I mean, you know better than me. Do you think he'll sit down before a game and say, "Look, Trey, I need to get Neto some run today. You're only going to play the first half, or you're not going to play, but keep working in practice on this. I think I'm going to bring you back in 2 games." Do you think those conversations happen, or do you think, like Ennis the other day, didn't get off the bench? Do you think he knew that?
I can't say for sure with every instance, but I've been told that, you know, by some players that they knew going in that they weren't. Now, in a couple instances, it might have been one of those things where they probably thought they weren't going to play for a half, and it turned out to be a whole game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, based on what happened. But I can't say, you know, every time that Brett Brown has a conversation with guys, you know, of keeping them up to breast. You know, the thing is, you know, sometimes, I hate to say it, but sometimes these guys are grown men that you figure, and they're making money. And it's nice if a coach says, "Hey, I'm not playing you today," but at the same time, I don't think the coach owes it to a player to say you're not playing today, or you may not play for a while.
I don't know if I'm the only one that does this, but I find myself obsessively looking at their faces. Oh, yeah. You know, like when I see Neto come in, I look right at Trey Burke to see to see how he's going to look, or when Mike Scott starts the first half and doesn't start the second half, and I don't know. I don't know if they're all good actors.
They're not all good actors, but here's the one thing I would say about that. I think it comes to a point now where, let's just say if one guy was getting inconsistent minutes, one guy, then it will come to a point where, he's looking at teammates like, man, this is crazy. How come I'm not getting any burn? And he is. I think the fact that all of them are getting minutes like that, it's kind of like, oh, here we go again. Now, again, the unfortunate thing is when you got a guy like Trey Burke, you have a guy like Neto, you have a guy like Kyle O'Quinn. These are all guys getting the veteran minimum, a 1-year deal, veteran minimum. So for them, they really want to play because they want to extend their career. So when they don't play, it just doesn't look good. Like how many guys you hear, especially that came here, like they got DMPs, coaches' decisions, veterans, and they go and they leave, and next thing you know, they're out of the league. So, these guys are trying to preserve their careers, but at the same time, the inconsistency is for everyone. So maybe, they're looking that way, but I don't think it's because of, wow, I don't think it's a rivalry between Neto and
No,
Trey
that's
Burke,
fair.
You know what I mean?
But I will give you the counter argument. How many guys sit on the bench, DNP coach's decision that goes somewhere else and end up thriving? There's been a few of those.
They were young guys, though.
Young, like TLC, all of a sudden. I'm not going to say he's great, but he's getting 20 minutes a game. Yeah, I'm not even going to get into the Markelle Fultz discussion. That's another podcast. But he's looked pretty good. I don't know if he would be good enough to play on this type of a team. But there have been a few examples of, you see Justin Patton put up 40 in the G League the other night.
Yeah. Or what about, here's one guy for you, Rashawn Holmes.
Rashawn Holmes starting for Sacramento.
Yeah, he's playing well.
Jeremy Grant.
Yeah, Jeremy Grant. But what I'm talking about is like an older type veteran. Like, okay.
Like Trevor Booker didn't work out.
Like Trevor Booker.
Yeah.
Amir Johnson.
Right.
What's the guy? Jared Bayless. You know what I mean? Guys like that. They came here thinking that they were going to have roles, and next thing you know, they get DMPs. And all of a sudden, it's like they're out of the league.
Do you think that hurts them for potential buyout candidates?
I
remember Korver was up for it last year. I know he had a relationship with Budenholzer, decided to go to Milwaukee. There were a few other buyout candidates that chose not to come here. Do you think that kind of a thing could lead to?
I think when you're a buyout candidate, you're basically like, typically, you played 70% of a season with another team, and you had to have a great year, or you had to have some stock for people want to bring you in as a buyout candidate, right? So when you come here, you're basically chasing the chip. That's all it is. So in your minds, you're like, man, I probably won't come back here next year, so I'm gonna go elsewhere. So for that, I think that's different because you have guys who basically, when you get bought out, you come from a struggling team and you're coming to a team that you think can win a championship. Now, the problem is, can you mesh with Joel Embiid? Can you mesh with Ben Simmons? Now, if you think you can't, you're not going to come.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're not going to come. But if you feel like you can, you will. But typically, like the buyout guys, I think that, outside of Ersan and Marco Bellinelli, typically these are guys who just come. I'm gonna be here for a little bit. I'm gonna try to get a championship, a chip, as the kids say, and then I'm off to the next.
Wrapping up the Brett Brown discussion. I know we're all over the board, but this is great. I always enjoy talking with you, and it's pretty much answering a lot of the questions that I have as we go. But you think there's any chance Brett Brown doesn't make it through the season?
I think he makes it through the season. I mean, when you
regardless, a 5-game losing streak to the Knicks and teams like that, do you think that could? I mean, it almost felt like if they lost to the Nets, that hot seat was going to get super hot the other night.
I mean, I feel like if the Sixers fall out of playoff contention, then he could go.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen. So,
but they could be a 6th seed, which would be a huge disappointment. I still think look, in all honesty, they're probably going to be about a 3 seed because they're better than a lot of these other teams and their schedule's more favorable. And, there's going to be more teams starting to tank that are these bad teams. So that I would be shocked if they're not a 3 seed or worst of 4. But they could be, this team could. What's interesting is this team could lose in the first round, or they could make it to the finals. They're just a weird team.
This team's not going to make it to the finals. But look, here's the thing. This is the reason why Brett Brown isn't going to lose his job. So during the season, because if you're looking at it right now, the Sixers are in 6th place. They are 3 games out of 2nd place. They're 3 games out of 2nd. So my thing is with all the stakes that the Sixers had. Now again, Brett Brown is going to be the scapegoat no matter what. But with all the expectations they had, they can't up and say, you know what, we're going to tear this thing up. And so as long as they keep it and as long as they try to win, you look at his bench. Now, if he would have had Monty Williams, Brett Brown could be going already, but he doesn't. He has a lot of guys. Now, he has one coach on the entire staff who was a head NBA coach. And that was Jim O'Brien. That's Jim O'Brien.
And he's not even a bench coach.
And he's not even a bench coach anymore. So, who are you going to hand the keys over to? Now,
so do you know of any precedent? I asked Peter Vesey this on Twitter, who has been on the podcast and I've developed a relationship with. He recalled I think it was 1979 maybe, where the Sixers fired Gene Shue and brought in Billy Cunningham, who wasn't on the staff at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of other examples where, a guy has been fired and they brought in somebody that wasn't connected with the team. I don't have a lot of examples. Like everybody wants Mark Jackson or Jason Kidd or Jeff Van Gundy or one of these guys because they hear him on TV all the time. But it'd be pretty rare that somebody from outside the organization jumped in the middle of the season.
Yeah, it would be extremely rare just because of, it's a different time, and when you look at that team that they had, well, this team is loaded too, but that team that they had, we're talking about Hall of Famers that was on that squad, so I don't know, like this team right now, if I'm a coach from the outside looking in, unless you're looking at this team now and you decide that I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna be a disciplinarian, and what I mean, or I'm going to be demanding. Let me say that way. You're going to be demanding, or you're going to hurry up and make some like adjustments, some like blunt adjustments, like, hey, Al, you're coming off the bench right now. You're going to be our guy. We love you to death. We'll reevaluate stuff next season in the off season, but we're going to do that. And then secondly, hey Ben, you got to shoot the ball. If you don't shoot the ball, I don't know how many minutes you're going to play. I need you to shoot the ball. Right now, I don't.
And the next thing he's going to ask for a trade to the Lakers.
Well, you know what? Then he can do that. The thing is, like right now is like, I love Ben. I really like Ben. I like Ben a lot as a person. But if you're a coach and your job is on the line, sometimes you got to put people in uncomfortable positions. And if they don't do it, then they become this scapegoat, not you. You know what I mean? Hey, it is what it is. I love Ben. Ben is going to shoot when he wants to shoot. I get that. But, sometimes as a coach, if your job is on the line and you come in, you got to be able to have the heart to say that. And that's what the next coach, if it's not Brett Brown, if he loses his job, that's what the next coach has to do. He has to demand things from these guys. He does, because this team is extremely talented. It's just that, some people have some habits, and pieces just don't fit.
I want to talk to you about the defense, and I want to talk to you about potential trade chips. Let's take a quick break.
Okay.
Okay, so as we break here, the Sixers are an odd team. We all know that. Because you just don't trust what's going to happen. Are they going to make 10% of their three-pointers or 45%? You don't know what you can trust. One thing you can trust is my car guy, and his name is Kobe Fryer. Kobe works with Matt Blatt Kia in Toms River, Egg Harbor, and Glassboro. I've known this guy for 35 years. As a matter of fact, several people from the podcast have reached out to me and said, is this guy for real? And he's hooked them up with a great deal, whether it's on a Kia Telluride, which was the Motor Trend SUV of the year, whether it's another used car, which they have tons of, or he was able to help a friend of mine get out of a lease. He was able to help another friend of mine get a car for his son. And he is able to help with any credit situation, which can be handled with ease. You can reach out to Kobe directly at 609-706-2101 or reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with him. Thanks, and let's get back to the podcast.
This is Ian Rappaport from NFL Network. You're killing me, Smallz. Stay tuned for more from Mike Small.
All right, welcome back. So, Keith, before the break, we started talking about the Sixers defense. Now, I thought, and I think a lot of others did too, that this would be a really good defensive team. They're pretty good. They're not great. And, they still can't play the pick and roll. It's not as good as we expected it to be. Why do you think that is? I mean, the talent's there.
Yeah, but I also think that it's like a catch-22 when you have such a big lineup, right? So you have two centers, basically. You have two centers and two.
You can argue three.
Yeah. Well, you can argue three, but you can also argue that you have a point forward in Ben Simmons. Mm-hmm. You have another power forward in Tobias Harris, who's not known as a defender. His defense has improved. I will give him that. His defense has not improved. And then you have two legitimate centers in Al Horford and Joel Embiid. They're big, man. They're big. And now you have Tobias guarding threes, right?
Yeah.
Right? You have Al guarding fours where he struggles, right? So, and then also they're so big, like when you get back on transition defense, like I'm surprised they beat Boston Celtics 3-0 because you would think Boston would push the pace against them. They tried. But to me, that's like the plus and minuses. Like right now, this is the regular season is more like up tempo. You can mix it in with a half court. And I think that for the playoffs, I will give them credit for this. You would think in a slow down game, they may be a little bit more effective. But, it's crazy, man. And then think that's why teams are killing them with threes, because it's like you got these big guys trying to run out and close out. Yeah. It's just I don't see it.
They have to be, I don't know the stat, but they have to be leading the league in giving up the most lob for dunks, especially off a pick and roll. I mean, it's unbelievable how often, Embiid always steps out, they throw it over his head, or Horford. Horford, it seems at least 3 or 4 times a game to be out of position on a pick and roll lob. Their perimeter defense has gotten, Ben Simmons' defense has been incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, what he did to Luka Doncic, it's too bad he got that third foul, because that was shaping up to be a really fun night, and then they took the second half off and got crushed. But when he picked up that third foul, Brett Brown took him off him, and Josh Richardson wasn't as good as Ben Simmons to be able to hold him down. But I think, when you look at the expectations coming into the season, it was, we're going to play bully ball. Forget about Embiid's health. We want Embiid to stay healthy. We want Ben to shoot. That's not happening. We're going to play bully ball sometimes. We're going to be a great defensive team. What am I missing here? There were 3 or 4 things that were just.
Did you say Ben Simmons is going to shoot? You already said that.
I did. That. Let's talk about that. I mean, Ben Simmons is going to shoot. Tell his agent, tell his coach, tell his parents, I want him to shoot 1 3-pointer a game. I want him to go to the line 10 times. That's not happening. So I think Brett hurts himself by saying things like that.
Yeah.
And we did talk about Brett in the previous segment, but it's just, I think the bottom line is this is a good team. They could be really good in the playoffs. They look amazing on Christmas. It could be as simple as if they shoot above 35%, they're going to win a lot of games. Mm-hmm. But they're just not living up to expectations.
No, they're not. And a lot of the expectations they put on themselves. And I think a lot of people thought that since they lost by 4 bounces in regulation, that they were going to go to the championship. They were going to win after Toronto won. Now, to me, the only thing that we know that's true is if Kawhi Leonard's shot didn't fall, the game was going to go to overtime. That's the only thing we know that's true. That's it. So you can't base it off.
We also know that they had 3 shot clock violations with a lead in the last 3 minutes.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So exactly. Now, when you look at that, so a lot of people, and I'm not going to get into their matchup with the Milwaukee Bucks, how it was last year, how they paired up against them, because all that, we can go back and forth and debate Sixers being overhyped. Right. But when you lose J.J. Redick and you lose Jimmy Butler and you bring in another center and you bring in Josh Richardson, but you don't really upgrade your bench, right? I felt like it was a lot of hype. I felt like people looked at it and said, wow, they got a guy who was great at Miami, it's going to work. Wow, they got a 5-time All-Star in Al Horford, a great guy, it's going to work. But no one actually considered the pieces. And I also think that everybody got swept away because they saw a Ben Simmons video, right, of him shooting the ball. They got swept away because Brett Brown told us that Joel Embiid was in the best shape at the start of a season since he's been here.
And Ben Simmons told you that if it's open, I'm going to shoot it.
Exactly. Yep. If it's open, he's going to shoot it. But the thing is, man, it's like I think that a lot of people were drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit too. Instead of sipping the Kool-Aid, I think they started chugging the Kool-Aid, And then now all of a sudden we're looking at it, and the coach is saying, "Well, wow, it's going to take until Christmas, till after Christmas." And then after that, he's saying, "Oh yeah, I don't know what happened." And then the coach says, "Yes," and you mentioned this before. Yes, I want to tell the agent, tell the family, tell Ben, tell everybody I want him to shoot at least 1 3 a game. Ben hasn't shot. Ben attempted 1 3 after that, which was like an end of
clock
a quarter.
Running down.
Yeah. But so it's kind of like it's just a lot of hype right now. And don't get me wrong, I think that this team would be underachieving if they didn't have all the hype. But at the same time, I think people will say, well, you know what? They lost JJ. They lost Jimmy. Last year's team was better. They need to get a bench. They need to get a point guard. But when you start self-promotion, because Brett Brown was out there in the beginning saying,
I want the number 1 seed.
I want the number 1 seed, and Embiid was saying that. So you start the self-promotion, and then you have people, let's face it, man, you're around a team more than these national analysts who came out and said, they're going to win it. Oh, they're going to win it all. You know the flaws that they have. They don't. The difference is these people work for networks, and they have a wider audience, so they become experts. But you know way more. Mike Small, you know way more about the Sixers than they do. So all of a sudden, it gets blown out of proportion, and now they're having such a disappointing season when the pieces didn't fit from the start.
Think about this. Last year, Brett Brown had the excuse of, I've got 3 different teams, right?
Yeah.
They made the Jimmy Butler trade. All right, you got to give me a couple months on that. Then they make the Tobias Harris trade. And then there's, a couple of other things going on later in the year with some substitutions. But, there's not that excuse. I mean, we could see something at the trade deadline. I don't expect any of the starters to be traded, although Al Horford for Chris Paul would be great. I don't see it happening. So there is no excuse for the lack of chemistry at this point.
Well, he does have one excuse that he's going to use.
Don't say it's Embiid being hurt.
Embiid being hurt.
How
is Embiid being hurt? And then here's something else. I hate to say it. Before Embiid got hurt, Al was starting to shaping up to be the scapegoat. It's like, well, Al Horford isn't like playing, to the standard that we thought he was going to play to. And to me, that was the reason why I say the scapegoat is because I felt like Al Horford wasn't being utilized correctly. And per this podcast, I assume you feel the same way.
I do.
So, there's always excuses. It goes back to, when Ben Simmons, when the team was struggling the year Ben Simmons didn't play. Because remember, the tanking was over then. The tanking was supposed to be over then. But then Ben Simmons was hurt. So then all of a sudden, wait till next year. And then, Embiid, something happens. Oh, wait till next year. And they can't say wait till next year now, but you best believe with Embiid being out at least a month, I know they didn't give a timeline, but it's going to be at least a month. Brett's going to use that as an excuse.
So before we get into trades, one last question. They're playing in the playoffs. There's 2 minutes left. It's a tie game. Are you giving the ball to Josh Richardson? Are you giving the ball to Tobias Harris based on one good? Because he hasn't come up big in the clutch before last night, in my opinion. Are you still trying to feed it down to Embiid? I think they missed that more than anything else from whether Jimmy Butler was a good fit, whether he was a good guy, whether any of that stuff. You counted on him taking the ball at the end with ice in his veins.
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think I'm giving it still to Tobias. I think I am, just because, I know he hasn't always been clutch, but then I'm thinking about games like last year at OKC. Embiid was out. He was clutch. The thing about Josh Richardson, I think that based off of when they went to Indiana and they lost, they drew up the play for Tobias at the end.
The one he got blocked by Sabonis, was it?
Yeah, the one that got blocked by it was T.J. Warren.
That's right. That's right.
But you look at it when you say Josh Richardson. Josh Richardson I like his game a lot, but I think that if I want to go down, I'm going down on my 6'9" guy who's probably the best shooter of anybody in the starting lineup. So I got to go with him. Embiid, Brett Brown always says he's the crown jewel. I get all that, but so much has to go right. Like the outlet pass has to be right. Embiid has to get the right touch. You got to hope and pray he doesn't push off on somebody.
You don't want him to put the ball on the floor.
You don't want him to put the ball on the floor. The next thing you know, like all these things, we're talking about, you mess around and get a shot clock violation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so I have to go with Tobias. I know that his track record says that, maybe he's not a closer, but I also think that, he's making $180 million. That's closer type money. It's time for him to show it. He showed it last night, and there were some other games he did. The thing with Tobias, to me, is Tobias is such a good teammate, to whereas he doesn't want to make it about himself. Well, he has to start making it about himself. And as good as Josh was in that fourth quarter against the Pacers, he scored 17 of their 26 points. He had 17 of the 26 points. The problem is no one else got involved. So and he's a 2 guard. So he's looking for his shot, and I just feel like Tobias is just a better option to me at this stage of their careers, when it comes down to the clutch.
So let's get into who could be on this team. So you reported Luke Kennard is a possibility, as well as Langston Galloway from Detroit. There have been a lot of other reports talking about, Bogdan Bogdanovic, who would be a great fit, but I think really hard to get. Bertans from Washington, Alec Burks. There's a lot of names out there. Keith Pompey, put on your prognostication cap. At the end of the deadline, who's most likely to be a Sixer that's not on the team right now?
I would say I would consider Langston Galloway. And the reason being is...
Does that help, though? I mean, he's cheap and he can play the pick and roll. He's not a great shooter.
He's better than anyone they have. I mean, right now. The thing is, as far as getting stuff like things that they need, they really can't afford a lot. So, like, the one name you didn't mention was what's his name? Robert Covington, who used to play for the Sixers. Well, I'm hearing like Minnesota, and people always ask for a lot early on. But Minnesota is telling teams whenever they call, like, yo, we want a first in return, So then you get Davis Bertans, right?
Yeah.
So the Washington he wants to stay from what I'm hearing.
Really?
He really likes it there. They think that once John Wall comes back, that's going to be a quality team. And he knows that he's going to have a role. So the thing is, and let's face it, he can make more money there than anywhere else, right? So
you're not maxing out Bertans.
You're not maxing. Well, he won't get maxed out here either.
No.
I mean, over there, but he'll make more money.
But he's 27, and maybe you can do some things to, maybe Al Horford if you can get rid of him in the offseason and admit that mistake and put Tobias Harris back at the 4 and grab a competent, not expensive backup center for Embiid. then you can pay him.
Yeah, but you got to realize Ben Simmons is going to break the bank next year too.
That's true.
So,
well, they're going to have to pay the tax.
Yeah, they're going to have to pay the tax, but I think that Washington really wants to keep this guy.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I know Washington really wants to keep the guy. And then, we can talk about with Eton Moore, how much is he going to help the Sixers? So when you're looking at it,
I can't see New Orleans letting him go. He's young. He's good.
Yeah,
they're building
young,
him.
But it's not like he plays all the time, though. That's the thing. Like another guy, Malik Beasley, but I don't know how much. See, the thing about Malik Beasley is from what I'm hearing is, he's a guy who they had a chance to sign him to an extension early. He turned it down because he thinks he could get more money as a free agent. So, but the thing is, you're looking at the Denver Nuggets right now.
He's not playing a lot.
He's not playing a lot, but he can help that team. He's basically like, they're in third place. He's a great shooter. Are you going to get rid of somebody for him and bring in a project like a Zaire Smith or someone like that? You know what I mean? That's not really going to help the team.
They're a playoff team. They're a playoff team. Deep playoff team.
Yeah, they're a deep playoff team.
It's not a good fit.
So, to me is, the Sixers, if they really, truly want to make a splash, they need to monitor all these teams that's struggling and try to get someone in the buyout market. But again, the thing about the buyout market, you have to be in contact with the agent to make sure the player wants to come to you, because it's one of those things where, like a trade, typically you get traded, you have to go.
Right.
With a buyout, you get to go to where you want to go. But I think the Sixers need to be patient. Now, in regards to them going out there getting a guy like a JJ Redick type or someone like that, I don't see it happening. I just don't, because they don't have the assets to bring in a JJ Redick type. So I just don't see that. So it's going to be a fringe type of guy like a Langston Galloway or someone like that. I don't think they have the assets to bring Robert Covington back. I don't. So
I don't know how much he helps you, to be honest with you.
I mean,
he can't dribble. He can't create a shot.
But they need it.
The perfect scenario for me is a point guard, a guy that can Chris Paul. But of course, that's a perfect scenario for a lot of teams. But a guy that can play the point, that can shoot, that can dribble. And Ben Simmons gives him 10 minutes a game at the power forward.
Yeah.
They play together, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the key. Well, Keith, I've taken a ton of your time, and I feel like we could go on for another hour, and we probably shouldn't because we got to get this thing out. So anyway, thank you so much for being a friend of the pod, friend of mine, and always a great guest.
Thanks for having me on, my man.
How do we follow you on Twitter or your podcast?
You can follow me on Twitter at Pompey on Sixers, and you can go to my podcast, which is Locked On Sixers. I'm getting it all messed up, man.
Well, you want to listen to it tomorrow because yours truly is going to be the guest. So, little co-promotion here. Thanks everybody for joining the Killin' Me Smallz podcast.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.